Hi, I'm Lady Genevieve, and I am back to talk about Pam and Tommy, a show that I would love to just pretend doesn't exist because it's bad and exploitative. But since Pamela Anderson seems to already be taking that approach, I might as well speak on it one last time. I had thought for a while that I would cover the whole series on an episodic basis, but I've officially hit my limit with it. When strangers try to pester me online over the show's inability to understand or practice consent and the total hypocrisy of the message it's trying to send when this show has been made in the way that it has, I lose all stamina to carry on saying what should be abundantly clear. So I want to just address this one last time, and then I will be free to move on to speaking about a number of other things here on my channel. I actually have already received press screeners for a different series that I have been watching, and it's been really refreshing to watch after being stuck in this Pam and Tommy space. I can't give any specifics about that other property because the embargo has not lifted yet, but when it does, I will be posting a video sharing my thoughts on it. I feel like everything I want to say I've said at this point about how terribly exploitative and lacking in self-awareness Pam and Tommy is as a series, as are the people higher up in the power hierarchy that worked to make this show exist. There are, however, three other things I would like to present and address, and then I will get to close this chapter. The first point is Pamela Anderson's friend, Courtney Love. I vaguely remember when this story broke. I try not to comment every time there's something dramatic happening on film Twitter, since there's always something going on, and if you get too far sucked into that corner of the internet, you will do nothing else with your time. This was a story making its rounds during May 2021, when the first promo for the Pam and Tommy series began to be released. Courtney Love, who is friends with Pamela Anderson and has been friends with her for decades, posted on Facebook, which I don't use and you shouldn't either, by the way, 0 out of 10 people would recommend. The post read as follows: I find this so fucking outrageous. When Pam and Tommy's sex tape was out, myself, Patty Chamel, Melissa Off-Dumar were making a record, and the lone women in many recording studios in LA, where all the staff engineers, producers, owners were watching the tape with huge schadenfreude, guffaws. It was disgusting. I banned anyone discussing it. It destroyed my friend Pamela's life, utterly. Last week, I was asked to approve using a Rolling Stone cover of mine, shot by Mark Seliger, in this piece of shit that they had approved. I said, no, shocked. Gentlemen don't approve of this sort of thing. My heart goes out to Pammy, further causing her complex trauma. And shame on Lily James, whoever the fuck she is. #vile. Apparently a bunch of stans lashed out at Courtney for singling out Lily James. I think the statement might have been a bit more effective if she had named all of the men that were higher up in the hierarchy of developing, producing, writing, and directing this series, but we will get to them in a bit. Courtney Love is being a good friend by posting this, and more specifically, she's being a protective friend. Courtney Love knows how vicious the media and the public can be, especially to women in the public eye. People have made fun of her for years in horrible ways, especially when it comes to very serious things like her struggles with sobriety. I find it interesting that there are a lot of people who responded to this post by lashing out at Courtney as if she's not in the right to speak on this and say what she said. This happened to someone that she loves. She would have a much more personal insight into how it affected Pamela Anderson in real time back in the 1990s, the lingering effects of what happened as the years have gone on, and also how Pamela would feel about a trashy exploitative series being made to yet again sensationalize and make a spectacle of what happened to her with the tape, and also with her marriage to an abusive man who was convicted for that abuse. Also, why would anyone expect any other stance or reaction from Courtney Love when this is a woman who called out Harvey Weinstein publicly all the way back in 2005, that is 12 years before the exposés came out? And do you know what Courtney Love got in return for being brave enough to call out a serial abuser in the upper echelons of the industry, she alleged that she was blacklisted by one of the largest talent agencies in the business, an agency that is rife with controversies about enabling this abusive culture in the industry, yet they got in deep with the Time's Up organization after Weinstein was exposed, which some people have alleged was an attempt to rewrite history about all the bad PR they've received from these things coming to light. I'm not a Courtney Love encyclopedia. I'm not endorsing everything that she has ever said or done in her life or her career, but there is clearly some sort of pattern here with her and the values that she holds when it comes to condemning the exploitation of women in the industry, and we know she's a real one about that because her career took a hit for doing the right thing. I will always respect whistleblowers who do what's right even when it's dangerous for them to do so. That is a level of bravery that I have the utmost reverence for.
Hi, Comic Central.
Do you have any advice for a young girl moving to Hollywood?
I'll get live with it. If Harvey Weinstein invites you to a private party and the Four Seasons stuff.
I would much rather take Courtney Love's scathing response to the series as valid and credible than stans on the internet who are determined to like something just because a performer they admire is attached to it. The second thing I want to bring up in this video is an article that was published on Esquire. This article addresses many points that I've brought up in my past coverage of the series, but there were a couple of other astute observations that I wanted to share. Each episode takes care to remind the viewer that while the hot-headed Tommy Lee may have invited karma past his doorstep, Pamela Anderson was an innocent victim. A global 90s sex symbol, she was the reason for the tape's mass appeal and the one who stood to lose the most from its distribution. That much is obvious, but it's a bit rich to take the high ground so boldly, considering Pam and Tommy, a series created entirely by men, doesn't challenge that dynamic. It perpetuates it. I had said a fair bit of this already, but the author is also noting how this series is entirely created by men. I don't want to go so far as to say that men should never go near challenging subject matter like toxic masculinity and systemic misogyny when developing or writing projects. I also don't want to say that if women had been the one to create this show, none of the problems would exist. I fundamentally believe that this series never should have been made in the first place, regardless of the genders of the people that made it. The only asterisk to that, which I've mentioned before, is that there is that possibility that you could have explored the nuances of what happened if you had done it in a documentary, and only if you had Pamela Anderson consenting to work on the project. What I want to point out, though, about the fact that the series was created entirely by men is that none of these specific men were equipped in any way to go near this subject matter. That is entirely evident by how terrible the series has turned out. A better example of how men can approach developing a project with serious subject matter that is in a similar realm to this series, but actually have the final product turn out incredibly well, is when Ben Affleck and Matt Damon decided to develop the story of The Last Duel into a feature film. They started to develop the script by adapting the book The Last Duel, A True Story of Trial by Combat in Medieval France, which was written by Eric Jaeger. In the original book, Marguerite de Carouge's perspective wasn't there, so Ben and Matt brought Nicole Holofcener to do a lot of the heavy lifting in developing that final perspective, that being Marguerite's, which is also shown as being the truth.
The story's told through three perspectives, two male perspectives that Ben and I worked on, and then one female perspective that Nicole did. And once we did the drafts, we put them together and we all worked together on it. But we were very much adapting Eric Jaeger's book. And so in a way, Ben and I, wrote an adapted screenplay, and Nicole wrote an original, because when she did her pass on Marguerite's character in the third act, she had to invent a lot of that stuff.
I've never collaborated on a movie with anybody else. I've always written them by myself. So this was a first, and it was more fun, let me tell you. Sitting in my house writing alone.
It's not about making an oversimplified generalization of what men can or cannot do, or what women can or cannot do. You have to have a certain level of technical skills, regardless of your gender, but you also have to have a level of self-awareness about the limitations of your own perspective. Ben, Matt, and Nicole all collaborated as screenwriters in general across the entire script, but there was definitely a gap in Ben and Matt's lived experiences, and to their credit, they knew this, so they got a writer who was both a woman and a skilled screenwriter to further develop the story in where they felt that it would be lacking if she had not come on to work on the project. I think the men who created Pam and Tommy are in too deep into their Hollywood bubbles. There is a real cognitive disconnect here. I know that to be the case, and the Esquire article points out another sign of this. Pam and Tommy is marketed with the same tabloid salaciousness that surrounded the tape in the first place. I criticized some of the marketing, particularly the photo recreation, but another thing I want to connect to is this is one of the official posters. This poster has the tagline, "The greatest love story ever sold." I hate that. I hate the emphasis on hyping up how they used to be in love, because it reads as unbearably tone-deaf considering that Tommy Lee was convicted of spousal abuse, which, again, I don't see nearly enough people calling out when discussing this series. The article further states, however, it's a bitter pill to swallow that Lily James, a wholesome English rose, who was praised for taking on the role before the show even aired, will likely earn an Emmy nomination for transforming herself into the very person that Pamela Anderson was booted out of Hollywood for being. Worse yet is the version of events that gives Gautier a fictionalized redemption arc, while actual Pamela Anderson endures yet another media run of a traumatic event that refuses to rest. In the end, there is a distinct sensation of the snake eating its own tail. Even at its most accomplished, Pam and Tommy replicates the original sin by turning the tape into another form of entertainment. I agree with every bit of this excerpt. A scripted television series like this is going to first and foremost prioritize trying to entertain the audience, to have a complete and compelling dramatic arc and character arcs, which is very clearly why they have the audacity to use all that airtime on trying to redeem the creep who stole and leaked the tape. Pamela Anderson has stated in an interview with Vanity Fair that she still suffers from PTSD from this ordeal, and that this incident will hurt her for the rest of her life. That Vanity Fair interview happened in 2004, and you don't go into adapting a story like this without doing your research. So you cannot tell me that you didn't know how traumatic this was for Pamela. You did not get her consent to tell this story. You are using her likeness and profiting off not only that likeness, but also off of her trauma. Because make no mistake, all entertainment media is not produced without expectation of making your money back. I'm actually studying producing right now, and you will not get funding for a project if the people who agree to fund it don't expect to get some money back. They want that return on their investment. Sometimes you can go through a process where rich people will donate money because the project has received a sort of non-profit agreement, so the rich people who donate can do a tax write-off, but there's no way this type of project would be classified as that, so yes, this project would have been made with an expectation and anticipation of profit. It's vile and removes any sort of moral high ground the people marketing it are trying to claim they have. You claim to want to let everyone know that you want the world to know about how wrong it was to violate Pamela's consent to steal and distribute that tape. And then we come to the third and final point I want to bring up in this video, which is a clip from a promotional interview about the series in which Sebastian Stan admits to having watched the tape. I'm going to put an image on top of it to try to fend off copyright, so if you see that, that's why.
Have you watched the tape?
Well, it was research.
You were there, right, okay. So you knew what you were doing in that
I think
scene?
the job as an actor is always to find as much as you can possibly find on the people you're playing, especially if they're real life people.
Now, I've just played the clip, but if it's not there, that just means the YouTube copyright bots or some external company has filed a false copyright claim on my video, and I've had to remove the clip from my video as a result of that. But I have linked the clip in my description box, so you can hear him admit on the record to having watched the tape. I didn't know it was possible to be this obtuse about the subject matter you're meant to have familiarized yourself with to work on a project, as one of the leads, no less, and to be so nonchalant in admitting your consumption of the very thing the show is claiming to be wrong to watch. It feels redundant to say how horrible this is. If you play a murderer for a role, do you need to watch films just for research? If you play an abuser for a role, do you also need to watch videos of abuse just for research? Do I need to continue giving examples of how ridiculous this line of thinking is? There are boundaries of decency that you simply should not cross, regardless of the research you want to do for a role. I've made more than one video essay on my channel. I've done research papers for upper education. I'm well aware of the importance of research. I am astounded by how determined some people are to defend a badly made show that fundamentally doesn't understand the moral thesis it's proclaiming to make, simply because some performers they like are working on it. And I'm still not even trying to claim that these performers are the center of the problem, but any and all of the people that willingly charged ahead with making this series and working on it when they are established enough in the industry to have the luxury of choice in which jobs they take are more so symptoms of larger problems on a systemic level. This is all symptomatic of a larger scale of ignorance that is compounded by capitalist greed that disconnects you from a nuanced emotional intelligence that would have told you at the very beginning of brainstorming this idea that it was a bad one. I do not wish to speak about this series anymore on my channel. I think I have more than said my piece on the matter, and I would rather spend my time discussing other films and series that I find interesting. My next video will hopefully be an interview that I was actually supposed to do last week, but there were some technical malfunctions, so it had to be rescheduled. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.